Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today is all about multi-agents. We're going to highlight what makes Squads, and that is our version of multi-agents, a critical product to build reliable and scalable voice agents. We'll show you a demo of how it works and hear from our customers and our team about how they use Squads and what technical insight led us to create this product architecture. Most voice AI teams follow a similar painful path where they start with a simple assistant to, let's say, just book appointments. And then the product asks for payments, then customer service, then order tracking. And the prompt starts to bloat into thousands of conflicting instructions, and it breaks in subtle ways, and it becomes almost impossible to debug. Traditional conversational flow builders, they don't help either. They just kind of hide the routing logic with meta prompts that aren't visible and they're quite hard to debug. And Squads is our answer to this problem. It's a way to handle things like dispatching, scheduling, billing, and support all in a single conversation without relying on one giant fragile prompt. Squads are essentially a team of specialized assistants that work together to handle complex conversation flows. So instead of having one bloated, do everything agent, you basically break down the problem into very clear roles. So a greeting assistant qualifies the caller and figures out what they need. Then a scheduling assistant actually books the appointment, and a support assistant handles complaints from customers. And these assistants, they'll pass control silently inside the same conversation and sharing only the context that's actually needed. The caller experiences one unified assistant. So you get a clean separation of logic, you get simpler prompts, and you get a system that's easy to extend and to debug. The problem that Squads solve is, first, they let you break down complex voice flows into very clear, logical parts instead of one big prompt. And that structure reduces hallucinations and incorrect tools, which are very common because each assistant only does one thing and it does it very well. And it makes higher stake use cases possible, where you need like tight control and strict instruction following. And you can reuse the same assistant across multiple squads. So the quality improves over time instead of starting from scratch every time you want to expand to a new use case. What makes squads work is its underlying architecture. So a squad is essentially made up of one or more assistants, and each assistant has a prompt and handoff tools, one or more, that can route the conversation to another assistant. When the handoff happens, you can pass exactly the context that you want the next assistant to have by configuring the handoff tool, as we're going to show you in the demo later today. Assistants are fully reusable across squads. You can override or you can tweak their prompt per squad without touching the underlying base assistant. As your use case grows, you can just plug additional assistants into the squad to handle new flows and to handle more complexity. A squad lives inside a single call session. So there's always one active assistant at any moment. And when the call starts, one assistant, one primary assistant handles the call, and then it delegates to others via handoffs as needed. And together, the squad handles the complexity, the nuance, and the flow during the entire call session. When do you use an assistant versus when do you use a squad? So you use an assistant essentially when you want a simple, one smart agent that is freeform, that can handle natural conversations for generally simple tasks. Basically, it's a single brain that can handle everything. And you use squads when you get more complex. For example, you need a network of specialized assistants with some structure, with multiple purposes in the same call. And in that world, squads act sort of like a team of specialists that collaborate together and hand out to each other behind the scenes. From the millions of calls that we've seen in production, we've identified some common patterns when building with squads. We have things like sequential patterns, routing patterns, network patterns, tree patterns. I'll describe each of these in the subsequent slides. The sequential pattern is the simplest one we see. It's essentially assistants in a straight line. Assistant A, then B, then C. Each finishes their own task or their conversation turn and then hand off to the next. Routing patterns add a sort of a traffic cop or an intent manager, basically one assistant that looks at the user requests and then routes to the right specialist based on the condition, like an intent or a customer type or the kind of risk that you want it to handle. A network pattern is one where it lets assistants talk to each other more freely. It's a web of peer assistants that can collaborate and share context when multiple skills are needed in the same conversation. And each assistant can hand off to any other assistant in the network. Finally, we see tree patterns, which give you a sort of hierarchy, a top-level orchestrator that handoffs to sub-assistants, which can then hand off again. And it sort of mirrors a branching decision tree in your business logic. So to recap so far, squads turn one overloaded big assistant into a small and well-organized team. Each assistant does one job. Handoffs are explicit, and you can structure them in a pattern that matches your business logic or your specific use case. And then you end up with a small team of focused assistants that can hand off very cleanly. You can keep adding things like payments, support, and routing without turning your system into a brittle, hallucinating, messy mega prompt. Next, as I promised, we'll show you what this looks like in practice via a live squads demo. And for this next section, I'll hand off to my colleague, Arthur, who is the lead engineer on squads. I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to hand off to you.
So hi, my name is Arthur. I am a product engineer here at Vapi. For this demo, we will be building a network of assistants for a hypothetical hotel that already has 3 assistants built. Here we have 1 assistant for booking, 1 for concierge, and 1 for restaurants. So let's head on into the squads builder. I've already created a squad with 1 assistant. The first thing that you'll want to do is to add all the assistants that you want within the squad. So I'm going to add my concierge and then my restaurant squad members. Then you'll want to choose your starting assistant. For this example, I want concierge to be my starting assistant. So I'm going to go here, and then in the top left, I can set it as my start node. So this is the assistant that will be starting the call. The next thing that you'll want to do is to give all of the assistants context that they're now part of a team. You can do this either by overriding the assistant within the squad or modifying the base assistant. I'm going to opt for overriding this current the squad assistant so that there's a little bit more simplicity here. But if you want to modify the base assistant, you can also click on the button in the top right and it will open up the assistants in the assistants page, and you could do that there. You could find a copy of this prompt in the handoff tools docs. So you can take this, repurpose it for your own prompt yourself. So heading back into the squad builder, now these squad members are aware that it's working as a part of a team. Next, we want to be able to connect them. So this is where the handoff tool comes in. I'm going to add 2 handoff tools per member to form a complete graph. And then if you click on the yellow bar here, it will bring up the tool panel where you can rename the tool name. And with this newly renamed tool, we can add it to the prompt of each assistant.
Arthur is wiring these up. Just want to add on here that for OpenAI models, it is recommended to have 1 handoff tool per destination. So depending on the model that you use to handle the squads. For Anthropic models, you actually want to use 1 tool for all of the destinations. And remember, as you're wiring up your assistants in the squads, to give them a robust description, a very clear and explicit description of how each tool should work in any case, depending on which model you use. This helps the assistants to hand off more cleanly between each other.
Thank you, Jimmy. So next, we'll want to connect them using the tool to draw lines. So in this case, we'll want to form a fully connected graph. I'm going to draw 6 lines so that each assistant has a handoff to each other assistant. While we're here, I wanted to point out some features within the tool panel. We've already renamed the tool, but there's also a couple of features here like context engineering plan, which allows you to truncate or modify the context passed to the following assistant. If your context window is getting too large, this is the feature that you'll want to use to reduce that context passed. You can also extract variables mid-call, and these variables will be available as liquid.js variables for all subsequent assistants in this squad. Lastly, these tool messages behave as any other tool within Vapi. These add determinism to your handoffs, and you can basically guarantee that a static message is said in the process of this handoff. You can check out all these features within our docs page in the handoff tool sections. Lastly, I want to talk about overrides. So previously, you saw me override each of these assistants with some system context about their squad. This is a single assistant override, so I'm only overriding one assistant at a time. This is useful if you don't want to change the underlying assistant, but note that now these two assistants are decoupled because the base assistant changes will no longer get applied because we've already overridden it. So that is one caveat here. If you want to modify all the assistants within a squad all at the same time, you can click on the squad's overrides button. This is a global override. This is useful if you want to, for example, unify the voice of all of your squad members. That way it's a more cohesive experience for your users. In the top right, you'll see that each one of these assistants now have the Vapi Elliott voice so that I don't have to manually do it for each one. The full configuration of assistants is available to override within the API, but right now in this UI, we only provide the minimum. Okay, so now that we have our squad, let's give it a demo call to make sure all of our handoff tools are working properly.
Thank you for calling the Grand Horizon Hotel. This is James. How may I help you today?
Hi, James. I wanted to know more about your restaurant offerings.
Hi there. This is Isabella for restaurant reservations at the Grand Horizon Hotel. How can I help you today?
Hey, actually, I wanted to book a room at your hotel.
You reached the Grand Horizon Hotel. Sophie, speaking. How can I help you today?
I need some room service to deliver to my room at 123.
Thank you for calling the Grand Horizon Hotel. This is James.
Okay, so yeah, we verified that our handoffs are working properly. The next steps here are to make the transition smoother, making sure that the first message isn't said every time, for example, and you can play around with engineering the context window. That's it for our demo. Please go try it out at dashboard.vapi.ai/squads.
Thank you, Arthur. That was a great demo. Very cool to see the transitions as you're testing out a live voice call. Now, we've just walked through what squads are and why they exist and how the architecture works. We've shown you patterns on how to build them, but the interesting part is how they actually behave in production when real customers and real edge cases are on the line. So for the next 20 minutes, we are going to switch from slides into stories. I have with me Kwang from Fleetworks, Dakota from Veritas Agents, and our very own Nikhil to join me for this multi-agent panel, aka squads. They're all running multi-agent setups today at scale and have broken things in all the ways so you don't have to. We'll cover how their stacks look like before squads, how they structure their assistants and handoffs, and we'll end up with a concrete advice for anyone about how to build their first squad. So now, to get started, I want to ask you first, Dakota, and then Kwang, if you could please describe in 1 minute who you are, what your company does, and what kind of calls are you handling with multi-agent systems like squads today?
Yeah, so as Jimmy said, I'm Dakota. I work at Veritas Agent. We're a company that makes AI agents for financial institutions, and they handle customer conversations across anywhere in the life cycle for financial institutions. So the sales pipeline, servicing, and also collections. And as you can imagine, working with financial institutions or anything in the financial space, there's a lot of really strict regulatory guidelines that we need to be following. And we've found that Squads has been really helpful in implementing some of these regulatory guardrails that are very necessary, keeping the conversation flowing as it needs to be, and also allowing us to add in phrases that need to be said at very specific times within the conversation.
Thank you. So consumer lending, legal compliance, talk about high-stake use cases. What about you, Kwang?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Kwang, and I'm CTO and co-founder of Fleetworks. What we do at Fleetworks is we build AI agents in the transportation space that we serve specifically transportation brokers. These are the people who handle a lot of phone calls and emails, and the use cases on the phone can be fairly complex and with a lot of branching logic. And squads help us a lot in managing that context, that logic, breaking it down into more modular ways. And be able to like handle longer running conversations.
Awesome. So more complexity. I want to switch it up a little bit to Nikhil, who's an audience as well. Nikhil is our founder and CTO. I'm curious, what's the original insight that led to build Squad?
I'm trying to remember. It might be Kwang, honestly. Kwang was the seed for a lot of things because he was pushing the frontier of capability. And the core insight, the core issue, the pain that we saw across a bunch of YC startups that were pushing the frontier was hallucinating, like at a certain limit. It was, I think, like around 4K prompt length. Some people were able to push it to 8K, but like you really just couldn't stretch it beyond that. And they wanted a way to extend it. We went through a couple of different architectures and realized that there's a way that this has been solved right now in the world, which is call centers. Call centers have like thousands of people that are orchestrated, which is kind of annoying for customers when you get transferred. But as an architecture, it works. And with AI, it didn't feel like multiple people. But we knew that architecture could work, and we tried it. And if it works for Kwang, it works for everyone.
Awesome. Follow the pain, make something people want. Dakota, I want to pass it on to you. Before Squads, what did your setup look like? And then what started to maybe break as complexity started growing?
Yeah, as Nikhil was alluding to also, we were using single prompt assistance, and the length of the prompt was getting way too long. So the assistant started hallucinating. It started forgetting a lot of the regulatory guardrails, revealing information when it definitely shouldn't have been. And the specific problem that we were having that led us to move to squads was at the beginning of the call, we need to fully verify who we are speaking to before we can reveal any other information. And when all of the information is in a single prompt, we were able to get past that guardrail, get all the information without having the identity confirmed. And that would land us in a lot of really bad legal trouble. So the squad setup that we use most frequently is we have one assistant that's just there to verify identity and doesn't really know anything else. So it can't reveal any other information. And then another assistant that has more information, and it still allows fairly long context windows, so we can still have really natural conversations. It's not you have to go from A to B to C. The main agent can still answer questions and going through the conversation flow, jumping around within there. But we have legal things very separated out.
Dakota, you mentioned legal consequences. What does that mean in your world?
Yeah, either we would or one of our clients would get sued, and it would be like a very massive, very expensive lawsuit.
That's not good. And what about you?
Yeah, so before squads, we were also using single assistants for a while. The problem is that the prompts grew too long. The context was just too complex, and there's context windows issues. And then there are also too many tools on one assistant, and that was causing a lot of confusion for the assistant. And this was a year ago when the assistants were way worse, or LLMs were way worse. And so it was really important to optimize for right context. And before squads, we actually built something in-house that was leveraging custom LLM on Vapi to manage that state transition ourselves. And it came with custom history, conversation history management, etc. But what Squad allowed us to do is to have a clean abstraction from switching from one context to another, and allow us to focus more on our core business logic versus like just assistant plumbing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So better context switching and also more accurate tool calling. Kwang, when we spoke about this before, you had a very nice mapping of how your squads work today, how you use them today, and how you logically structure them. Would you be able to talk or share more about that?
But yeah, so this is a real use case we have, and it's each box. You can imagine that as a squad member. We have effectively a routing assistant initially that does that routes to the correct squad member, and that varies depending on the who calls. So it could be, in our use case, it could be carrier, shipper, driver, all these various people that are calling into a phone line, and depending on that, each squad member will have its own tool calls. So, for example, for the shipper and facility squad member, it's important for them to be able to get facility information or delivery status. And for a factoring company squad member, it might be something like getting payment status. But some use cases are more complex than the others. And so, for example, when it comes to handling trucking companies, carriers, they have more branching out when it comes to use cases. So a carrier might be calling in on load booking or payment or disputes and whatnot. And so this in turn would route into its own squad member with its own individual set of tools and context. So this is follows like the pattern, but the tree pattern. But we also have some other more simple use cases that follow somewhat of a linear pattern where it goes from one assistant to another. And yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's a beautiful tree diagram there. What about you, Dakota? How is your squad set up today?
Yeah, we definitely don't have as many assistants in a single squad as Quan does. As I said before, a lot of ours are, especially for outbound calls, it's currently 2 assistants, one that just does the identity verification, and then it does a silent handoff to the main agent after the identity is verified. And the customer never realizes that they're actually speaking to 2 different assistants. We do have a bit more complexity for inbound calls, where again, the first assistant is identity verification, but then we have to figure out what bucket that customer actually fits into. And again, silently transfer it to the main assistant for whatever that case actually is. Are they calling to change a payment, or is it someone we need to be negotiating with?
That's awesome. This is something we often hear in terms of being able to hand off silently between 2 or more assistants, so the user experience feel seamless and that there's this one agent that can help them do multiple things. Now I'm going to switch it up to Nikhil, and I wanted to share with the audience some more technical insight or some of the deeper insights. What do you think are the limitations of workflow like or conversational flow builders today?
Yep. This is something, again, when we were designing squads, we went a lot of back and forth on. Kwang and I have chatted a lot about this as well. And we also did attempt to build a workflows product. Our eventual insight was anytime you're not giving the developer control over some minute portion of the prompt, they can't get the ultimate agent working correctly. So a simple example being, let's say you build a workflow with nodes and edges. You set up a node which is like, ask the user for their location. If they say San Francisco, go here. If they say New York, they go here. If they said something else, go there. ABC. And you notice empirically that for some reason, the model that you're using is not transferring to something else correctly. If they say like Mississippi, it transfers to New York just because the model just does that and you can't control their behavior. Now, if there's an edge and you specify the condition and you don't understand the meta prompt that is happening, that is actually going to the GPU, you as a developer don't have it any way. You might say you really, really need to make sure, you feel limited. Instead, now if you imagine you can control the exact message that's being sent to the agent, and you can add a keyword it's really important you analyze that this is not San Francisco and New York, and if this happens, go there. That level of control gives people the flexibility to achieve the performance and the behavior that they want. So that maybe is technical insight where anytime you're using a product as a developer, if there's some part of prompt here that's hidden away from you that you don't control, you are giving away potential performance that you will need and reliability that you will need. I think it'll be maybe helpful even Kwang and Dakota, if you guys have tried other workflow products and like it ran into some limitations. I don't know.
Yeah, I had tried workflows for a bit before I moved back to then single prompt assistants and then squads. I found workflows to be more limiting for how like free and conversational the conversations could be. It really had to go in a certain order and it couldn't be customer led if they're like, I want to talk about this before I speak about this. And yeah, it just was a much worse customer experience. There were also a fair amount of bugs in it that didn't let us move it to production.
Yeah,
We had
so
a similar experience. We've tried workflows and they just felt too rigid, and it didn't feel like you were talking to a human. It felt like you were talking to a phone tree, to an IVR system. And the whole point of adopting a lot of this technology for our customers is to have a very natural sounding, very human-like experience. And so that's why Squad felt like a much better fit for this purpose.
yeah, totally. We find that workflow tends to be useful for a narrow set of use cases where you want a very deterministic set of steps, maybe in like a brief outbound call where you want to say these three things and ask questions to your customers. But Squads is a much more powerful abstraction for the best optimal trade-off between free-formness, natural conversation, and control. So we actually we have a great audience here, and based on the sign-up information, it looks like there's a mix of early Squads customers or users and advanced Squads users. I was wanting to focus on the early users. So Quan, for someone who is about to implement their very first Squad, what's one tip or lesson that you've learned that would have saved you a lot of time that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to prompting. So prompting very effectively, writing very description for each of your squad members will help the agent, no matter what LM you use, will help the agent to transition cleanly. But also keeping the context really small, breaking it down as much as possible. So for example, some of our prompts are very small to the sense that to the point where like they're reusable across phone and other channels of communication. So keeping it very small and modular so that you can iterate on them and refine them tends to be very effective.
So start with single prompt, optimize, make the prompt smaller. What about you, Dakota? Any tips to share?
Yeah. So as I said before, we want to make sure it's like super conversational. We don't want that rigid, like IVR feeling. So we make sure not to break it down more than necessary. We do probably need to break it down a little bit more than we have right now since our prompt windows are getting excessively long again, but keeping it as simple as possible. But also, as Kwan said, with some of the prompting, if you want to make sure it sounds like one person throughout the entire call, make sure you're telling it that another agent has already been having that conversation and you're just continuing it. Don't say hi at the beginning. For the first one that's handing off, make sure it hands off silently. And we've also found for our use case that the handoff messages have been really useful for just uninterruptible messages in the middle of the call. And it's when where we frequently put legal disclosures.
Yeah, we do often hear the sort of like context engineering, context management becomes really important to make that experience great. For each of you, Kwang and Dakota, if I were to ask you in one sentence to describe when should someone seriously consider using or moving into squads, when would that be? I'll start with Kwang.
Yeah, so when your agent starts hallucinating, that's probably when you should seriously consider breaking it down. But when you get a lot of branching logic, for example, a lot of customers, they want a different handling if it's outside of business hours, if it's inside the business hours, if it's English speaking agent, it should be behaving differently. It also like varies a lot depending on the language. So as your use case grows, that's when you want to consider moving to squads.
Yeah, I fully agree with all of that. And I would just add for us, we needed to hide information from the LLM. So if you have certain parts where you can't give the agent that information yet, consider breaking it down so you can hide things from your agent.
That's awesome. Nikhil, I think you wanted to jump in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question actually. This relates to the question people are also asking. Did you guys try ever like tuning different parts of the different agents to have different configuration of like models, like try like a lighter model, more heavier model, like different voice? Like, did that go well in any of your customer experiments, or just kind of it's ever the same configuration for everywhere?
Yeah, we're doing a little bit of work on that now, and it seems to be working just fine. But that's all just in development right now, so I can't speak too much on it.
Yes, for some of our first squad members, they tend to run on smaller and faster models because the context is not yet that long, and you can sometimes get latency improvement by using a smaller model. But then as you go down that squad tree, it tends to be like bigger models handling the conversations.
This is something we talked about before. In your experience, what's a good sort of point where number of tokens or number of tools where it makes sense to start thinking about breaking an assistant down into multiple assistants via squad? Kwang?
Yeah, so my heuristic is usually like a couple hundred lines at most. If it becomes really hard to understand even as a human, then it's probably a good time to split it. But yeah, it's if it gets complex enough, that's when a human changing the prompt, sometimes you create like inconsistencies between different instructions. And yeah, so the general rule is if a human can understand it, then it's if a human can't understand it, then you split it.
Awesome. Thank you. Anything else you want to share on that, Dakota? Do you have a different experience?
No, fairly similar. It's more just like in our tests when it started not following instructions and started hallucinating, but really didn't know where it was supposed to be in the conversation. That's when we definitely had to break it down and also just simplify the prompt a little bit more.
Of course. Awesome. There's some questions here that have been placed here in the Q&A feature. I know we've been answering some of those questions. For example, can a squad let two agents talk, like humans together, or is it just one forwarding, executing thing? The answer is there's only one active assistant at a time. I wonder if there were some other questions for the panelists here specifically. Do we have anything?
I think one cool one I saw was, is there any ceiling to what you can do within the squads framework? So I'd be curious to hear from Kwang and Dakota. There's a couple things that we're looking to bring in, but even without that, when we research like what is the ultimate objective for people building on squads is like you want to deploy something on the phone or on web that can do everything that every business workflow that you needed to in a single interface. And we realize like a lot of that is just boiling down to like giving these models the right access to the right prompt, which is like business context, and tools, which is like API requests. Like, so the biggest work is this lifting. The biggest lift is like getting your end customers to like expose APIs. But beyond that, and that was the agent, right? The agent is just like a bag of tokens and tools in a loop. And there's nothing else that really compromised like these agent systems at scale. So Squad as a primitive, so far for us has felt this thing which just it scales into infinitely to infinite complexity. There's some things like browser agents or asynchronous UX that we're looking to bring in more cleanly. But yeah, I don't know if Kwang, Dakota, you've found like there's pieces or things that limitations you run into that people should know about. Yeah, anything that you dream about doing that is hard to fit in the framework right now.
I think some issues I was having previously for inbound calls, I had like 5 or 6 different assistants that we could hand off to. I think this is still with the transfer tool that was before the handoff tools, is sometimes getting confused about which one to hand off to. So definitely needed to simplify that a little bit more and in the prompting make it very clear of like, this is the exact reason you hand off here. Very like code based more than like figure out which one. It's like, if this variable equals this, hand off to this one. But it does seem to be happening. I don't think it's been happening at all since the new handoff tools and changing that sort of prompting. But yeah, definitely something to be aware of.
Yeah, we're pretty happy about the dynamic handoff feature that you guys released. I think that really makes things scale much more. For example, adding support for another language used to be like you have to add the same like branch for like the same branch for like every language, and that just growing the graph like in a very unsustainable way. But other than that, I think like yeah, like dynamic handoff really helped scale this much more. One thing that we often find ourselves doing is doing verification. So we have a lot of like effectively online evals frameworks that verifies that like you should be handing it off to to this like last very important agent that is actually gonna book someone on the load or on the job. And so that's like something that we built in-house and something that we tend to have like across like many different use cases. But yeah.
It's like the kind of things that might need to be code first are very tight verification loops. Yeah, something like that. Deterministic. But I think the handoff is a good call out. I think there's a couple things that maybe folks haven't heard about as the advanced kind of squad usage, where now in a squad you can give this agent this handoff tool, but it doesn't actually know where to transfer. It just knows like I need to call this when a condition is met, and then you from your server can return what the next agent should be, which has been super cool, I think, to see people can do with it. And then I think there's a question around like, hey, why do handoffs exist outside of squads? It's because you actually don't need, like, squad as a construct exists so that it's easy to play around in a canvas to attach assistants, but you can also have handoffs like that are without a squad container. It's kind of an advanced use case, but it's just totally doable for people who want to try.
I have a couple of questions from the audience that I want to take. I'll answer the first one, and the second one I'll get Arthur to support. So the first one is, can assistants also remain available as a standalone assistant after it's been added to the squad? Or also can an assistant exist outside of the squad? And yeah, the answer to both of those questions is yes, you can reuse an assistant. Once you place it in the squad, you can basically override it for that instance of the squad. The underlying assistant would have not changed, and that's what powers the ability to reuse them across different places. And then the second question is, I'll get support from Arthur on this one. Will sub-assistants be able to hand off the call back to the primary assistant if it's not in scope for the sub-assistant?
Right now, you cannot hand back off, but you can have two-way handoff. So as long as the sub-assistant has a handoff tool back to the primary assistant, you can do that. We haven't built like the undo or like go back.
Yeah. So this covers the panel questions and the audience questions. There's just one more slide that I want to share as a departing slide. And it's this one. I hope you can all see it. We have a special announcement for all of you here in the audience. We're launching a new program called the Squads Doctor. This is an exclusive 60-day support program for developers who are building production-ready multi-agent voice systems. And for those of you who attend today, you can scan this QR code. You're going to get $100 in Vapi credits, access to a private Slack community with direct support with our engineering team who build squads, and you'll get the support for 60 days. We have limited spots available. If you want to be part of this program, please apply by this Friday, December 11th at midnight, basically 11:59 p.m. Pacific time, to secure your spot. So that's this Friday, end of the day. Scan the QR code, take a screenshot, and make sure you fill out the form, and we'll be reviewing all the applications. And that concludes the panel and the session today. Wanted to give a special thanks to our panelists, Dakota, Kwang, Nikhil. And for the audience, thank you so much for your questions and for sharing all your insights today. Thank you, everyone.